let's take a look at the clave, the rhythmic clave. I want to explain what it is and why it's important, or I would say it's very important if you want to understand how to play jazz. And did you know that there's a correlation between the clave and the modes of the major scale? In this book, Fundamentals of Guitar, so this is not I don't take credit for this idea, it's from this book, Fundamentals of Guitar by Miles Okazaki. He talks about a correlation between all the modes of the major scale and how you can create claves from the same rhythmic shape, with the same rhythmic sequence. So we're gonna take a look at all that and how we can use that we can incorporate it into our practice routine. So lots of stuff, let's get right into it. If we play a good old major scale, that consists of whole steps and half steps, right? So whole step, half, whole, half. This is something we learn when we study music theory, right? Remember, the major scale is whole, half, whole, half. We could translate that to numbers, right? So there would be 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. So a major scale, you could say, is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Here's the interesting thing. If I translate that to rhythm instead, let's make the subdivisions 8 notes. 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1 sounds like this. One, two, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1. I'm sure you've all heard that sound, right? That is the most common clave, but we're used to hearing it in a different way. I'll get to that. But it's very interesting, to say the least, that it's the same rhythmic combination of the most common clave, arguably, and without a doubt, most common musical scale. Or, yeah, maybe the pentatonic, but the most common 7-note scale. So that was a 6-beat figure. That means that we could also be 3/4, right? So we could create a little jazz waltz situation if we wanted to. So let's make a little loop. Now I can play the scale. With that rhythm. Notice that the 8th note happens where there's a half step on the way up. So what does all this mean? That there's some kind of esoteric connection in the universe here? I don't know. There's a lot of ideas about, like, why are there 7 days of the week and 7 notes of the scale and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But it's fascinating, and we can use this kind of information to create more modes, which we're going to do. But this is a great way to practice, because now we're playing scales, but not with 8th notes or triplets. We're expanding our rhythmic sense of rhythm or sense of timing. So I would suggest that you practice this, try to improvise with this rhythm, right? You don't have to be strict like with following the rhythm, you could kind of leave it, but you base your improvisation on this rhythmic phrase, which is a really good thing to do, because this, as we will find out, this rhythm is very common in music, not only jazz. But we are more used to hearing it as a 6/8 or 12/8 rhythm. So if I transpose this rhythm to 4/4 and change the tempo to 75, which will give me the same, it's a metric modulation. So here's the triplets instead of, if I clap the same rhythm but with triplet subdivisions, you get this. 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2. And this is, I think, how we're used to hearing this rhythm. So it sounds like Afro-Cuban music, right? Where you hear this clave all over the place, and in African music and in jazz. So now we can create a little African sounding loop. I don't know, like... Then I can play this scale the same way I did before, but now as triplets. Again, try to improvise. So again, why are we doing this? Well, imagine that you're practicing your scales every day and you're only practicing them as eighth notes or perhaps triplets. Maybe chances are that when you play, you're gonna play a lot of eighth notes and triplets. So it's a good idea to inject some rhythmic variation into your practicing, and why not take rhythms that are part of the jazz language, which we'll see this rhythm for sure is. So another way you can practice is create a little rhythmic pyramid. So let's slow down here. Let's start off with eighth notes, then eighth note triplets, and then to increase the rhythmic. So I'm gonna start with the first one and then transition into the triplet feel. Okay, so I'm going back and forth between the two different subdivisions, and I set the metronome to a really slow tempo, so I'm not getting every beat, which forces me to keep the tempo and switching back and forth between those two subdivisions, triplets and eighth notes. It's a very, very good exercise. So you can find this clave obviously in African music, and I'll put a list in the description below to examples of music that you can check out if you want to hear this clave. And I don't think I can play, unfortunately I can't play you the examples here because the YouTube is gonna disagree with that. So this clave is all over African music, and then it ended up in America and we have jazz. So some examples of this clave is Man from Tanganyika, which is a really good, a very good example of this clave in jazz. There's a tune by Herbie Hancock. I think it's called Succotash or something. I'm not sure what that means or how to pronounce it. I think it's a dish. I'm Swedish, so give me a break. I don't know about these things. Also, Senor Blues is a really, really good example of this. The tune Senor Blues, I think it's Horace Silver. It's also a very, very good beginner jazz tune. So we kind of forget about this tune when we talk about tunes that, you know, like Watermelon Man, that we start out, when we're starting out playing jazz, we always get to learn about these tunes, but we should include Senor Blues because it has that clave in there, which is really good. So check out those tunes, and I really, really recommend playing along with those recordings because the clave is, getting a feel for that clave is an important ingredient in jazz. So another interesting thing is that if I, instead of grouping it like 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1, I can include the ones to the previous two, so it gets, so instead I have 2-3, 2-2-3. Then I get this rhythm. So we have this, right? And if I instead do this, you get this. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Right? That's 5 notes. And if I translate that to a different subdivision, you kind of get this. Which is arguably even more common clave. It's the rumba clave. I think it's the rumba clave. And that is 5 beats. So that, if you translate that into half notes and half steps and whole steps, you get the pentatonic scale. In this book, Miles says this: it's interesting to notice that 2 of the most common tonal sounds in the world, pentatonic and diatonic, are structural analogies to 2 of the most universal rhythmic figures. I would say it's more than interesting. I think that's an understatement. I would say it's mind-blowing. The study of the clave in the context of various cultures and musical traditions is beyond the scope of the book, but we can use the clave here as a link between pitch and rhythm to help unify these 2 areas of study. And he has all these like diagrams and shapes. It's beautiful. Like the art, the design of this book is amazing. This is like ridiculous, but I really, really recommend getting this book, Fundamentals of Guitar by Miles Okazaki. There is also, he's an educator too, right? Now, so he has some YouTube stuff, and I'll link to it. There's not a lot, but I think there's a few videos up there that's very interesting, so check that out. And of course, check out Miles Okazaki's music. It's really worth checking out. I think you'll like it. So now you're curious, well, if we can create a rhythmic clave out of the major scale, the Ionian scale, well, that must mean that we can create other musical or rhythmic claves from the other modes. Yes, that is correct. So what does that sound like? Let's look at the Dorian, for example. The Dorian scale is whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. So that would sound like this. And if I play the Dorian scale, C Dorian, like that, it sounds like this. Very interesting to note that in this case, the half steps happen on the same time as the eighth notes on the way up as well as descending. Why that is, I don't know. It must mean there's some kind of symmetry to this scale. It's beyond me. But let's make a little Dorian jazz waltz, shall we? So that's what the Dorian scale sounds like as a rhythm, translated into rhythm. So it's pretty interesting. So of course you can do all the modes, and you can create pentatonic scales from this same system. And I'm not going to do all that because the video would take forever. Plus, you could figure it out yourself, or ideally get this book and you'll have it. It's all laid out for you in a very beautiful way. Obviously, if you practice like that and you go through all of them, that's going to improve your sense of rhythm and timing. Because if you go back to that where we were playing the rumba clave as triplets or 16th note subdivisions, you might ask, well, which one is it? It's kind of in between there. That's why it's important to listen to this kind of music, because it's not, you can't really describe it in theory. I mean, I guess you could, but it's the same thing with swing, right? Because swing comes out of all this. You can play swing with the clave, and where is this? People ask me sometimes, how do you get a good swing feel? What is swing? And it's like, I don't know. There's no straight answer, but it's in between the difference between triplets and eighth notes, depending on the style of jazz and depending on the tempo and stuff like that. But that's why practicing this stuff, and especially playing along with a lot of music, not just jazz, listen to the African traditional world music and stuff like that, will give you a feel for the timing that is kind of what we're all trying to achieve. I don't know if I'm describing this in the best way, but I think you know what I mean. So that was my little lesson on that. So I hope you find that interesting and useful, and let me know in the comments if you think this was interesting, or maybe it was just all a bunch of confusing stuff. A little bit of housekeeping. I do lessons every other week, like lesson videos such as this one. And if you follow me on Patreon or support me on Patreon, that's when I charge as little as $1 for those. And any other video I make is not charged by Patreon. It's just for these videos that I make every other Friday at 11 a.m. Central European time. And every other week I make performance videos, but I don't charge my Patreons for that. So super thank you to my Patreons. You can see, hopefully, that my videos are improving. What I do is the money I'm getting from Patreon, which is like twice as much as that I was hoping for in the beginning, which is amazing. So thank you. I'm buying mics and lighting, but I still have to figure out how to use it. So I'm learning as we go. Like, I still haven't really learned how to use all this stuff. It's a new world for me. But the kind of stuff is kind of expensive. So thank you. It helps a lot with my Patreons. Thank you. And if you do follow me on Patreons, you get access to PDFs. And I sometimes make little bonus videos and stuff like that. Sometimes people ask me about Zoom lessons or Skype lessons. I do that on Sundays, and I charge 30 euros for an hour. I used to say 30 euros or $30, but the dollar has tanked, or maybe it's the Swedish currency that has tanked. I'm not sure. So 30 euro. And if you're in America and you're already taking lessons with me, it's still $30. That's fine. So because if you're consistently taking lessons, that's great. Some of you are already doing that, but you can contact me here. My email is on my profile page here on YouTube. So that was all I had for today, and thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I shall see you next time.